experiments for you to do around this idea of flight, the forces of flight and air pressure. Now some of the stuff might be stuff that you've already talked about before, but it does help to kind of get a hands-on approach with these sorts of things as well. So what I'm going to do is shuffle myself back. This used to be a touch screen, but the touch part's kind of broken today, so I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way. Alright, first off, what can fly? Yes. Yep.
Paper planes.
No one's really named things, so I don't know what your names are. What was that, sorry?
Bumblebees.
Bumblebees, yeah. Butterflies. Ladybirds. What can fly?
Oh, planes.
Planes, absolutely. One more. Excellent. Hang on for a minute. Everybody always... it's my turn to talk my rules. Everybody always forgets my favourite one, the fly. It's right there in the name. Alright, so we need our 4 forces of flight. Hang on a minute, I haven't asked a question yet. Hands down. Alright, here we've got our first one, lift. Now, each of these forces has an opposite, so I want to know what the opposite to lift is. Yes.
Gravity.
Perfect. And then we've got thrust. What's the opposite to thrust?
Drag.
Drag. Excellent. Now, this next picture is going to put them in the appropriate place on the plane. So where's lift going to go?
Ooh.
Just point in the direction lift's going to go might be easiest. Okay? Exactly. Up. Which means that weight is going to go
Down.
perfect. And thrust is going to go, which means that drag is going to go exactly. Now, what we need is we need all of these working together. So if we've got too much of one or not enough of one, it means we're not going to have controlled, sustained flight. And that's what we want. That's the kind of flight that gets you from New Zealand to Australia. Okay? Without control, we don't have a safe flight, which is very, very important. So we need all these things to work together so that we have controlled, sustained flight. Okay? Now, here's a question for you. Do you think this is all it takes to make an aeroplane fly? Our 4 forces.
No.
Excellent. The next thing we're going to talk about is this shape here. Have you seen one of these before? Can anybody tell me what it's called? Do you know what it's called?
Wing.
It is a wing, but that particular shape has a special name.
Airfoil.
Well done. This is called an aerofoil. So, who knows what the job of an aerofoil is? What's it designed to do?
So that the drag of the plane doesn't crash and then push the plane back. So it can go over and under and around it.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything else?
The air, so the air can go underneath it to push it up.
What we're going to do, I'm going to be the wind. Okay. And this particular plane is flying towards me. Okay. So what happens is we've got our air, okay, all around the plane, and what happens is some goes underneath and some goes on top. Now the stuff that goes underneath is called high pressure air, and the stuff that goes over top is called low pressure air. Now the next little slide is going to show you why. So, alright, these little dots here, imagine that they are the amount of air that are under and on top of the wing. Okay? So as you can see, we've got a lot more underneath than we do on top. So the stuff underneath moves a lot slower than the stuff on top. And because it moves slower, it means there's more underneath the wing at one time than there is on top of the wing at one time. So I want you to imagine that we've got a plank of wood, and you've got 5 people pushing it up, and you've got 2 people pushing it down. Who's going to win? Exactly, our 5 people are going to win because there's more of them. And it's the same kind of idea here. Because there's more air underneath pushing up than there is air on top pushing along, it means that the plane is going to go up. Okay? Now this is going to be an important slide, so I'm going to come back to it in a minute. But for now, so because there's more air under the wing, it has a higher pressure which creates lift. Okay? Now what we're going to do is around the room I've got some experiments I'm going to explain to you very quickly, and then you get the chance to go off and do them. So I'd like you to stay where you are, but switch so you're facing the other direction for a minute. I'm going to end up chasing you when you're around for a minute, okay? Alright. with drag. So drag is the one that goes backwards. So what I've got here is I've got this big bit of card. And you can use this, and we've got some fans here. And very shortly I'm going to bring in a giant wind tunnel as well. And we're going to use all of these to experiment with drag. So one really easy way to experiment with drag is to hold this out with one arm straight and one arm dead and spin in a circle. Okay? And what you're going to feel is you're going to feel the card pushing back into the arm that's behind it. Okay? Because remember, drag is the one that goes backwards. Who has ever put their fingertips out the window of a car when you've been driving along and had your hand go whoosh backwards? Okay? That's drag. Who has ever been running really fast and their hair's kind of been going all behind them, their clothes are going behind them? That's drag as well. So drag doesn't just happen to planes, it happens to anything that has movement. Okay, so we've got fans, you can put both on at different settings. You can try the experiment I just did there. You can try lifting it up and down like this, and you'll be able to feel that force of drag acting on our piece of card. We've also got an experiment here to do with thrust. Now, this is going to be a propeller of our plane. It is not going to be a helicopter, okay? And I want everyone to look up over there. That little stick sticking out there is the end of one of these, and it's been up there for about a year and a half or so. So please don't try and go upwards like helicopters, because it means I'm going to have more of them stuck up there that I have to get down. I still haven't got around to getting that one down yet. So what you're going to do with these is I want you to try and get this propeller to hit that target there on the table. So to make these work, what you're going to do, point your fingers towards the floor, and then you put the stick bit at the top of your hand, and then put your fingers over top. And then to make it go, all you're going to do is switch your hands around. Now I'm not going to try and hit the target because I don't want it to rebound and hit anybody sitting down. I'm going to go in this direction where nobody's sitting. So what you're going to do is like that. So just switch your hands over. Now, as you can see, that went quite quickly. So you do need to make sure that you don't walk in front of anybody who is about to let the propeller go, because if it hits you, it can actually hurt. So make sure you're being safe around here. Next up, we have got something to do with weight. Okay, so remember, weight is the one that goes down. So what you're going to do is someone in your team is going to lie on the floor with their chin on the carpet. So you're on your tummy, chin on the carpet, staring at the carpet. Then somebody else is going to come into this box here and pick out two objects. And then your team has to guess which they think is going to hit the ground first, hold them out at an equal level, and let them go. And then the person on the floor has to be the person who tells you which hits the ground first. Results might be surprising. They're not always going to be what you expect. So that's important to remember. There's a whole bunch of different bits and bobs in there that have different weights. Can I get you to sit up there? I know you're practicing, but you need to be able to see the next thing you're doing. Right, over here, this one is called the waitress trick. This is one of my favourites. So what we've got here is I've got a tub, jug of water, glasses, and cards. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to try and put water into the glass. That's not the hard part, we can all do that. The next part though, we're going to try and flip the glass over without any of the water spilling out. That's the hard part. So that's the reason we've got the tub here. Don't do this experiment over here, because if it doesn't work, we end up with a soggy big carpet. So make sure you're doing the experiment over the tub so it catches any water that might fall out. What you're going to do is pick a card. I'm going to go with this one. Okay. Pop it on top, and then you have to try and flip it over without the card falling off. Now, that wasn't too hard, right? Now, you have to be able to pull your hand away. Okay? And I want you to think about how this, what's happening here, relates to that slide that I had before with the pockets of air that I showed you, which I will put back on the board when you're doing this. I want you to think about how those two things are related. Now, I can even jiggle this around, it's still not going to fall off. So what I'm going to do now is pour it back in there. If you end up with water all through this bucket here, don't worry. All you need to do is take everything out and take it back into the jug. And please make sure you don't leave the cards floating around in the water, because that's how they get ruined. But I do have some paper towels here for any spills that might happen. Over here we have the paper tent. This one here is really easy to set up. All you're going to do is pop the paper in tent shape on the edge of the table, and you're going to take a very big breath, biggest breath you can, and blow straight through the middle of the tent. But before you do, you're going to predict what you think will happen. Is it going to fall over? Is it going to get blown backwards? Is it going to go inside out? Is it going to collapse? Is it going to do a somersault? Well, you can think about what's going to happen. So make your prediction and then try the experiment and see if you are right or not. Next one is called hoverball. This one here involves a ping pong ball and a hairdryer. It's a weird combination, right? So what you're going to do, and I'm probably going to answer your question with my demonstration. What you're going to do now is switch it on. Now, what I want you to experiment with here is different angles of the hairdryer are going to give you different results. I want you to see if you can make the ball stay in the air using the breath out of your lungs and out of your mouth. See if you're strong enough to make that happen. I want you to remember that this goes back in here once you're done. Now sometimes it will drop to the floor, and if it goes behind here, you just need to kind of roll the same way. Adults, if we can get you to do that, it's a little cable behind there. And so if it goes under there, that's fine, you can just go back and grab that. Alright, right round this side. Over here we have wind tube. Now this is where we talk about weight versus lift, okay? So what we're going to do is, first off, is we switch on at the wall. Okay, here we have a fan that is blown upwards, and I've got a whole bunch of objects here that have different amounts of weight and lift acting against them. And so what you're going to do is test them out and see which is going to go up, which is not going to go up. What we actually want is we want these objects to hover around the middle, because that means we've got a really good balance between lift and weight. If it goes straight up to the top, what does that mean we've got too much of? Exactly. If it goes straight up, we've got too much lift, and if it doesn't move at all, that means we've got too much weight.
What if it hits the ceiling and you can't get it?
I would be very surprised if it hit the ceiling, so you have to come and show me, because I don't believe you. Don't think it hit the ceiling, no. So we've got these objects here which you can pop in there and see what they do. Try to only put one in at a time. And the other thing is, I'm going to show you a good way to put them in. Start with this here. So what I don't want you to do is put them in and throw them up. So what we need is we need a fair test. That means you're going to put them in and let them go. That's what the majority of them are going to do. So you're going to put them in, let them go, don't chuck them up because that's not a fair test. Switch that off for a minute. Over here is our last table. This is just a quick activity where you can put in things into groups of things that glide and things that fly, and I want you to think about the difference between those two things. And then the last one we've got is this. So this is an aerofoil shape, so it's the same shape we had on the board before. And you're going to crawl into a giant wind tunnel, and you're going to hold it nice and tight like this. And if you're doing it correctly, you will have lift, which means your aerofoil is going to go right up to your top hand. If it doesn't work straight away, try flipping it over and seeing if that helps. In this room, I do not have lift. Okay? So you can tell that the wind tunnel is going to be quite windy when you're in there. Adults, the kids can't go into the wind tunnel unattended by an adult. If you don't want to crawl in, that's fine. Just let me know and I'll go in with them. But they can't go in without adult presence. Alright, so do we all know what we're doing?
Yes.